Beautiful. Okay. So for tonight's presentation, we wanted, because we know in the final stretch, of course, we're encountering barriers, right? We would foresee that in this week. So I'm really happy with the support that you guys have been showing in the group and also the vulnerability too, to say, hey, yeah, I ran into this barrier and this is how I overcame it, or this is how I'm struggling, and this is how the group can kind of come together to assist everybody and support everybody. So I just thought that was really beautiful what's going on in the group chat. I definitely want us to have time tonight. So we set aside time for a Q&A at the end, just like we did last session, just to like air through, common barriers, because we're more than halfway in. There's less time to go than what we've already put in, which is wonderful, just to help us get through this final stretch so that we can start getting to reintroduction. So tonight, of course, we're going to focus on overcoming obstacles. For those of you who don't know, my name is Amanda, of course. And the next presentation, we're going to go over that reintroduction as well. So to get started, right? This is like, of course, our layout for the rest of the program. So we have tonight's presentation.
Can't see your presentation.
Okay.
It just says loading.
Is loading. Here, let me. Oh, it's saying my screen's paused now out of nowhere. Why is screen share paused? New share, resume share. Okay. It's not even letting me resume share. Huh. Why is it doing that? I'm going to just stop and go back in. Let's see. Now, can you guys see my screen? Yay. All right, good. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yay. All right. So overcoming obstacles, overcoming barriers. And then next week on 6/27 at 7 o'clock, we're going to go over the reintroduction period and most importantly, celebrate ourselves because we did a hard thing of like doing Whole30, even just loosely following or following it strict is still something to celebrate. And also, I think coming together and having like a nice supportive group is also really cool to celebrate too. So tonight's common barriers that we're going to go through is, cravings, emotional eating, socializing, because we like to call this like second half of June to the first half of July, like insidious Christmas, as I feel like there's more social gatherings this time of year than even in December. So of course, helping with managing that and eating out, recipe burnout, but we've been managing that, of course, with new fresh recipes each week. If anybody's running into issues with like everyone in the family wanting different foods, and of course like managing stress, which can be a trigger for certain emotions and food. So we'll go into each of those tonight. I don't know why it's not letting me resume. Okay. All right. So when it comes to like cravings and hunger, you usually want to think of it in like three domains. There's environmental, physiological, like our body's physical needs for food, and then feeling based or emotion based, right? Hi, Eviana. Sorry, she's just a little ball like, hi. Oh, hi, Pete. Oh, and the puppy too. Hey, the whole gang's here. It's awesome. So with those like three domains of environmental, physiological, and feelings and emotion based, right? This all impacts cravings. And of course, so environmental, we think about like what's in sight and in mind. So having those like snacks, like the cocoa balls that we've been making, or like the blueberry pie, having that like pre-made in advance is a great way to like add competition to like say, if there's other family members that have other items in the house that are in sight and in mind and tempting, that we have something to reroute to, right? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail is like the little ism that gets said to like encourage that, meal preparation, or, looser meal preparation doesn't always have to be so strict each recipe, but at least having the items in the house or some stuff pre-made to the best of our abilities. Keeping water, keeping things in sight, right? Out of sight, out of mind. Physiological we'll go through next in the next set of slides, and feelings based. But it's always important to just talk about like environmental too, like the people that we surround ourselves, right? We have the awesome group chat, and we have our team here. So we create like a nice support network too for each other to help with that environmental piece. So when we're looking at like your physiological needs and your body's driver for foods, right? We want to consider our blood sugar, right? So of course, like this is a bit of a review, so I'm going to go a little quick for some of us. We have like our carbohydrate spectrum, right? It's essentially like your higher fiber foods on the left. And then as you go across this spectrum here, you see your lower fiber foods on the right. And none of us are really having a lot of these. It's just more to explain like when I have a higher fiber food, like the fruit or the vegetable, it's going to move slower through my digestive tract and spike my sugars less. So you'll see that here on this graph of blood sugar on the y-axis plotted against time on the x-axis. So the foods on the left side of this spectrum here that are higher in fiber, they're going to represent this yellow line. So when I eat it, that fiber is a little harder in my stomach for that acid to break down. So it's going to move much more slowly into my digestive tract and then into my bloodstream. And that sugar is more likely to like trickle in versus dump in if it's a more like a refined carb. And a lot of us are staying away from those refined carbs because they're, cut out with Whole30, but it's good just to get the general premise, right? Like, so if I take white bread and whole grain bread and I put a slice of white bread in, say, a container that's meant to mimic like the stomach with some OJ in it, and I let that sit in there, and I take, say, beans or fruit or whole grains into the other container with the same OJ, which the OJ is more metaphorical for the acid in our stomach, and I time it, that OJ is going to break down that white bread much quicker than it's going to break down, like, say, the beans or the apples. And that's to kind of represent that it sits in your stomach longer, holds you a longer period of time, helps to control cravings because all right, now my stomach is, physically filled a little bit more, and the sugar is more so gradually trickling into my bloodstream versus dumping and spiking and then, dropping back down, causing me to, want to crave that high again later. So it adds more depth to it when we have other nutrients, right? So we've always been advocating to have, protein in any of our challenges. We always talk about having protein at every meal, or pairing carbohydrates with protein and or healthy fat. So the basis of this is, now we've seen with carbs, right? The red line is a carb without fiber. The blue line is a carb with fiber. But now we add on the depth of the green line, which is like having the carb with fiber with a protein under healthy fat. So it's going to sit longer. Carbs versus proteins and fats are much bigger molecules, so that acid has to take more time to break it down. So then it's carrying us over longer. And if it's carrying us over longer, I'm less likely to go off and graze in my cabinets and things and start to feel physiologically hungry between meals or at inappropriate times. Say I just had a meal and an hour later I find myself hungry. And if we're seeing that happen, that could be a cue to ourselves. Did I get enough protein at that meal? Did I get fiber? The other end of that too, physiologically, is, am I hydrated enough too? Because if we're getting that urge to eat, it's like, okay, I just ate though. Why am I getting this intense urge? Is it hunger? Is it a craving? You start to ask yourself, okay, am I eating every 3 to 5 hours? Am I getting protein? Did I get my fiber in? Now, what about my water, right? Our hypothalamus tells us we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're tired. Your body doesn't care if you get water from food or beverage. So of course, that's always something to kind of run through the checklist. And I know this is review, but it's always good just to nudge it for everybody, just to put it on the front of the radar, especially when it comes to emotions and food and cravings. So it all ties into it. So if I'm not getting a meal that's balanced enough with like protein, fiber, healthy fat, by the next meal, I'm more likely to be at a 1. 1 is like, I'm feeling super hungry. That's when I'm ravenous and I'm like, just give me something. And I'm like picking as I'm trying to cook. And that's not a good recipe to combine together, right? The closer I get to 1, the more likely I am to end at a 10, which a 10 up here is more like your Thanksgiving full, that like unbuckle the pants full, right? So if we're having protein, fiber, healthy fat at meals, we're more likely to be at, say, like a 3 by the next time we go to eat, within like 3 to 5 hours, right? So when we started a 3, that first onset of hunger, the feeling of, for everyone's personal feeling of hunger can be a little different, right? It's important to always ask ourselves, what does hunger feel like for us? Is it that, my stomach feels like hollow. There's like the little contractions, the gurgles. Does my stomach make noise? Or do I get like a little lightheaded feeling across my forehead? What does hunger feel like for us? And once we determine that, it's usually about like a 3 should be that first onset of hunger. And we want to acknowledge that hunger and we want to honor that hunger to say, all right, I need to eat now, because if I push it off to 1, that's when I'm more likely to make not poor choices, but not as good of choices, because I call it getting like a case of the F-its. Like, I'm so hungry, just give me something now. And then we're less likely to make the best choice for us, because I'm seeing red. I need food. Like, I don't care. I just need food. Right. So we want to eat at a 3, and then we're more likely to end at like a 6, 7 when we start at a 3. So that's where this whole concept of balancing the meals, eating every 3 to 5 hours, and listening to your hunger kind of come together to help manage portioning in a sense. Does everyone follow that right now? Awesome. Thanks, Em. So that's where Whole30 comes in with, on that Whole30 kit, and we touched upon this a bit in the beginning, they give like some general portion guidance for meals. And so that's where this kind of all comes in from, because even though we're taking out those foods in our diet, we're also making sure we're eating enough of those, like what you call like satiating foods, those harder foods to break down, like the protein, like the fibrous carbs, like the vegetables and the fruits, along with the healthy fats, like the olive oil and the nuts and seeds, because those are meant to hold us over. And then following these like general portions and listening to your own personal hunger. If you're still hungry, increase your lean protein, increase your vegetables if needed, to help carry us over. This is just for, of course, if we're exercising, you guys saw this in the packet, just to plan like the pre and then the post. So you want to eat like 2 to 3 hours before your workout to help experience like consistent energy throughout the exercise, to include like a palm of protein, 1 to 2 handfuls or fistfuls, which is usually about a cup of like carbohydrate, and to better adequately fuel that meal, right? So we're not calorie counting per se, but we're more so portion minding. This could be good for people who are like, I'm so hungry, I don't know why I'm so hungry. And if you're exercising a lot, you can follow these general guidelines. I often like to recommend following up a workout with a meal. Like, so if you work out in the morning, you eat a little snack before you exercise, so you're not too full and then get acid reflux or throw up, and then you time breakfast right after your workout. So we're not skipping a meal, we're adequately fueling, and we're not catching ourselves super hungry and then having cravings later in the day. After your meal, of course, you're aiming for like protein and carbs and a little fat, so a full meal would be ideal. So some strategies to manage cravings, like we were saying, have those healthy alternatives, those complex carbs, like the berries, the apples, the almond butter, that you're binding the complex carb with a protein and or healthy fat at snacks, and keeping all of your nutrients, protein, carbs, and fats at your meals. For focusing on hydration. And then I don't really like to call it distraction, because if we're hungry, we should eat. We shouldn't distract ourselves. But like, I'll call them like rerouters, because if I'm coming home, say from work, right, and that's often a lot of people's like bewitching hours, is okay, I'm going to have a snack. I'm going to, give myself a portion of that snack. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to eat it slow. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to savor it. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it. However, after I finish that, I don't want to catch myself going back into the cabinet, grabbing from the bag, munching a little more. I kind of have to reroute myself. Let me go for a walk. Let me call a friend. Let me go play with the dog, make a cup of tea, to kind of occupy myself, if that makes sense. If I'm just kind of like boredom eating, or I call it like relaxation eating, like looking for food to kind of like cope and bring that down. Mindfulness, right? Awareness of the situation. Am I even hungry, or am I craving, right? Staying mindful, staying grounded in the moment. What's even going on? How much have I eaten earlier in the day? Have I eaten enough? am I stressed? What am I feeling in this moment? And I had an individual, he was so funny the other day. He was like, every time I get off the phone with my brother, because they've been talking about a lot of stress and family situation lately, I'm catching myself going and eating. And so he acknowledged, okay, this is my trigger. I know when I'm going and eating, I'm not super hungry. I'm just doing this as a coping mechanism for the stress I'm experiencing from the phone call. So then you take what that stressor is and acknowledge that, okay, hey, I'm coping with the food. And then saying, all right, what else can give me that same gratification that that food is giving me? And that could be a whole slew of different things for people. But mindfulness in terms of doing meditation, using the Calm app. I like to just box breathe. I take that from yoga, where you're breathing in for about like 4 seconds, holding for about 4 seconds, exhaling for about 4 seconds, and then holding for 4 seconds. So it's like a little box. Whatever works for you. Sometimes people need to have something that like occupies their hands. So I like to fold laundry, or I'll take like a desk drawer or a drawer from the kitchen, and I just want to like sort it and go through it. If we're like watching TV or something, paperwork, I just want to sort it or something, the mail. If we're sleep deprived, right? This is a common issue too, because it's like, all right, I'm going for this food. Am I going for this food because I'm hungry and I need energy? Or I'm perceiving that need for energy as, need from food, but really I just need to sleep, right? So that can sometimes cause like a mixed message similar to the hydration factor. And then, like we've been saying, you want to try to eat every 3 to 5 hours, AKA, especially for us ladies, breakfast, lunch, dinner, 1 to 2 snacks. And in an ideal world, we try to do that within about like 12 hours. So if I break my fast around 8 a.m., I'm going to try to cut off eating around 8 p.m., about 2 to 3 hours before bed. That can also help with stabilizing our blood sugars and managing cravings. So practicing mindfulness too. I know if I'm getting to like a 0 or 1, I'm super, super hungry, I'm eating faster, right? So if I'm eating faster, it takes time for that vagus nerve to travel all the way up to my brain to say, oh, I'm full. It's like the LIE at rush hour. So we want to eat slow. We also want to make it an environment that is soothing for us. So playing like some relaxing music, maybe even having like a playlist for that, a podcast, an audiobook, depends on if we're eating with somebody else, having nice conversation, can help to kind of like slow down eating if this is a barrier that we're running into. Awareness of our eating habits, like saying, okay, I'm going to start eating at 6 o'clock. Let's see what time I try to finish around, just staying mindful of it. It's not a race, or it's not I have to extend it to a certain amount of time, but just taking note, how fast am I eating? We can find that we'll have better digestion this way if we're eating slowly, because we're breaking down things into smaller particle sizes as it goes to pass through our digestive tract. So if I'm taking bigger bites and I'm not really like chewing that down enough, I can get more of that like bloating and discomfort. And then I can get confused, especially with the reintroduction phase coming up, and saying, oh, is it dairy? Is it the gluten? Is it the beans, etc.? Or is it that I'm just taking in too big of bites? And also then we don't feel as full when we're eating that at that pace. So by taking the techniques of like deep breathing, meditation, the little tips on this like placemat, I want to make like a fun placemat for people one day. With this, like taking away screens, TVs, putting the phone away, can all help. It sounds a little dorky. In college, friends of ours, we would go out to eat and we would put our phones on the side. Yeah, like totally normal college kids, right? We'd put our phones on the side and like stack them facing down. And the person who like had to grab the phone and say if it wasn't like an emergency, they wanted to like just text or look at Instagram or something silly, they would have to pay the tip. So it would be like a little fun thing. So it keeps everyone present and keeping the concept of the family meal table still in place. That can also be a good tip, because if I'm looking at my phone and my time and my attention is on something else and it's not really on the food, then I'm not really getting full satisfaction from it. I'm not really tasting it, and I'm not really giving myself time likely to really chew it down. So if that happens, Sometimes you can find some people like kind of lingering after the meal, wanting to nosh and grab little things because maybe they're not really getting that full satisfaction of like actually tasting and savoring their meal. Everyone's different, but these are just some ideas that might help someone out. So we want to identify triggers like we were talking about. So identifying triggers in like a food log can be used for the GI sensitivities. So we'll talk about this concept at reintroduction next, not just GI, but migraines, bloating, puffiness, weight, etc. next session. But triggers in the concept more so in terms of like emotion and feeling based triggers. So sometimes food journaling can really help because and practice better in our electronic medical record, you can always like track your mood around the meal or put comments in on what's going on. And it can kind of help you to put your thumb on, oh, when I'm, procrastinating from doing my work, I'm catching myself meandering over the kitchen and munching because it's like a form of pleasure when we're not feeling pleasure, if that makes sense. Or, when I come home from my mother-in-law's house and I'm feeling tense, am I noshing? Okay, is that a trigger for me? Or when I have certain feelings, so food as like frustration, if my fiance annoys me and doesn't put something away or whatever, am I going towards food, right? Like that's always certain things to look out for and note like different patterns. Is it certain times of days, or is it days, especially if I don't eat breakfast? Am I catching myself noshing right when I come home from work in like an uncontrollable manner, it feels like, right? Or late at night, is it days that when I exercise a lot that I catch myself really feeling a lot of cravings? Do I need to fuel my workouts a little better? So we're here, of course, to bounce those ideas off of, but these are just some ideas to help identify, potential triggers for these things. Social splurges, right? That's a trigger. So some strategies for managing these triggers. And once you can like put your thumb on it and say, okay, it's food as relaxation, right? So you would reroute towards, okay, what are some other things that relax me? All right, I'm just going to try to reroute that habit there. And every time I try to do that, I'm establishing new neural connections to reinforce that habit. And I have to give myself grace to know that nothing happens overnight, nothing good happens overnight, right? That it's just something I have to keep mindful of and keep pursuing. So we can focus on studying the relationship with foods whenever you find yourself wanting less optimal things or feeling uncontrolled with certain things or noshing, but it seems like the group's been doing awesome in the chat. We can focus on addition. What else do we want to add to our diet to maybe help if it's feeling like truly hunger? Keep trigger foods out of sight, out of mind. Buy sweets, but maybe in like individual servings of certain things as we get through like introduction and back out of Whole30, focusing on pace of eating like we're talking about. Or we just look at the frequency to which those food cravings are coming in and to which we're executing those cravings and saying, all right, if I am, getting this craving every night and I'm giving into that, temptation, and I know I'm eating enough and I'm doing it as food as relaxation, can I at least try to do it every other night? Can I try to make the portion smaller? Or can I do like a swap instead, which we've been utilizing the swap concept a lot with the Whole30 guided program that we're doing. I like the swap concept a lot because you're still honoring the craving, and it's still just important to ask ourselves though, am I actually hungry or am I craving? Is this a need or is it a want? And is it in line with the goals that I have? So if I'm trying to build muscle, did I get enough protein today? Oh no, I didn't, and that's why I'm feeling this way. Okay, well, my goal is to build muscle. I'm going to give myself a sweet swap that has some protein in it, for example. Of course, having a balanced diet that's also nutrient dense. So that's what's really nice about Whole30 is even though we're removing these potential triggers, inflammatory triggers, potential weight gainers for us is how some people will phrase it. We're still maintaining a balanced nutrient dense diet, which should also help to quench those like physiological needs for food that we should not be feeling super ravenous or hungry or dizzy or tired. especially if we're following the guidelines of, eating enough, like the portions like we outlined earlier, eating regular meals, eating every 3 to 5 hours. And of course, like ways that we can always like boost our meals is of course like the more color you have on your plate. You could see here on the right, the color in our food represents what's called like phytonutrients. So this is probably like the next group challenge guided program we're going to try to go towards, is getting more in depth with these phytonutrients, because you do want to eat the rainbow. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but each color represents a nutrient, right? So red can represent, say, like lycopene, right? Lycopene is going to be rich in tomatoes. When I eat tomatoes, lycopene is good for my heart. So because I'm eating that red color in my meal, I'm also benefiting my heart, right? Or we understand that like purple and blue, like from berries, right? Anthocyanin is really good for our brain. So this is where this concept of eating the rainbow comes from, because although say green is really good for us, it's rich in chlorophyll, right? Good for our blood. If I just eat green, yeah, it's not really bad. That's going to be good for my body, but then I'm lacking all those other colors, right? So that's what's really nice about Whole30 in this premise, that it does really incorporate or tries to incorporate a lot of nutrient rich meals. And of course, by eating our proteins, we're getting a whole slew of B vitamins, which is good for many things, including like energy. We're getting magnesium, which is great for relaxation. Sodium, of course, helps to bring nutrients into the cell, right? Zinc is great for skin repair, for example. Iron helps us to deliver oxygen to our body. So when we see the food as like, what are you going to do for me? Right? Like, I never like to think about that with anything with people, but when it comes to food, like, what are you going to do for me? Is this food going to give me, you know, a balanced, nutrient dense, is it going to give me these components of the phytonutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, the fiber, or is it really just empty in calories? And that's where this concept of empty calories comes from. It's foods like, say, white bread that's really been like kind of stripped of these nutrients. There's not much color. There's not a ton of, vitamins and minerals in it. So when I eat that, what's it really going to do for me? It's just empty calories. Where you can take another option that's also, say, about 100 calories, say like an apple, where at least I'm going to get a lot more bang for my buck in that way, right? So that's where that concept comes from. And if we're eating balanced, nutrient dense meals, it really can help to control those cravings and make us feel more regular with our energy throughout the day. Of course, when we're running into common barriers when doing, a Whole30, or just in general with making lifestyle changes, we need to seek support. And that's what we're all here for. So that's what's really beautiful about our group chat. Everyone's been super sweet with encouraging each other, cheering each other on. There's been a lot of really great wins in the chat, but then also, you know what, I really, really love and respect the vulnerability of like when someone speaks up and says, hey, I'm having a hard time. And like everyone comes in as a team to say, you've got this, or, offers a solution. I think that's amazing. And we need more of that in community. And that's what we're building, is community. Professional help, of course, like for deeper issues, especially more like medical issues, personal issues. A few of you guys have been like emailing us, messaging us on the side. Please don't hesitate to reach out. If it's something more in depth, that like sometimes it's hard to fully answer someone's question. If it's more medical, it might need to be more of a counseling session. We may recommend nutrition counseling for some individuals, but most importantly is to ask for help if you need it, because unless you ask for it, no one knows. And that's what we're all here for. That's the whole point of this being a group program. So another common barrier is lack of planning or eating out too much, right? Just like anything you want to achieve, you must plan for it, right? So we want to set an appointment with ourselves or a loved one to plan some meals. So I know with my fiance, sometimes he could be a little picky in a great way, that I have to say, okay, all right, I'm picking out these recipes, or I'm thinking about making this for the week. And I'll like, jot down a few ideas on this like dry erase board I have on the fridge. Okay, what do you think? Do you like this? Do you think you're actually going to eat this? Right? So you're getting some kind of buy-in, some agreement, right? I make the grocery list and we go through it and say, okay, is there anything missing? And then to the best of our abilities, look at the calendar and say, all right, is this a week that's really, really busy? Do I need to, get some more like pre-cut or like frozen veggies, or do I have more time available to, make my own, say, dips and spreads and dressings and things like that. So we have to be realistic with ourselves. There's nothing wrong with being realistic, setting those expectations. And, if you're a recipe person, pick like 2 to 3 recipes for the week, as opposed to prepping a million things and then having too much food waste. I think something that doesn't get highlighted enough is like, many people will plan their workouts for the week in advance, but thinking about planning, when are we gonna, cook or prep, just like how we would block that time in our calendar for our workout, block that time for when you're gonna cook, treat it like an appointment with a doctor. I'm not booking around it. I'm setting that boundary to say, this is important time for me, and I have these goals. And if I want these goals to be achieved, there's necessary steps that I need to put in place to achieve those goals. Of course, account for snacks, account for cravings. If you always crave something sweet after a meal, we can't stick our head in the sand and just expect it to go away. Let's try to, use these strategies that we're talking about, these swaps, to plan ahead for it, and not to fall into like the fad diet, intermittent fasting, to say like, intermittent fasting is not necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the person, but some people will turn to it, I see, as like, oh, I didn't plan breakfast, so I'm just gonna intermittent fast. So we're not going to call it intermittent fasting if it's lack of planning, if that makes sense. It's always important to keep like a high protein snack on hand, so planning that as well. Now, I think the bigger barrier, the most common barrier that everyone's running into, is social, right? The social events, the dining out. So of course, like, plan ahead, right? So if it's a family member's home that you feel comfortable with, discussing the menu in advance, saying, what are we going to serve? Okay, knowing, all right, is there going to be an option for me? Is there not going to be an option for me? And all right, if there is, that's awesome. If not, BYOHO, bring your own healthy option. And then of course you can pull different recipes that we've been, providing weekly, and bring that in. That's not a problem. If you feel comfortable sharing and you're at like a social gathering, and say you're dealing with food pushers and saying, oh, just eat this, just try this, have it, please. Thank you. I really would love to have it. I'm in the middle of actually trying to do an elimination diet right now, and I don't want to add that food in right now, but thank you. It looks awesome. I can take the recipe if you want. I would love to, give that a gander, down the road. But I think especially when it comes to family and friends, we can't expect people to know what's going on if we don't communicate to them, right? So we can set boundaries with people if there's food pushing. We don't want to feel like we have to avoid the party or avoid the gathering. That wouldn't be fun. And I don't find that to be the healthiest option too, that if someone's kind of withdrawing and, just staying in because maybe there's like food anxiety of what's going to be there. Am I going to have a healthy option? What am I going to do? We can look up the restaurant menus in advance, find compliant options. If you know a few days in advance, of course, like, you can always reach out to us. If you've got questions, we can help with that. And now a lot of these food sensitivities, the big 8 especially, which a lot of the Whole30 foods kind of, that can fall into that, fall into the big 8 allergens, that if you're at a restaurant, it's not. So if it's a big 8 allergen, like say dairy, right? And you talk to the manager at the restaurant, or you call them in advance, by law, because it's covered under the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, that they have to have an alternative for you or be able to modify for you. So again, it's one of those communication things, unless they know, they can't help. And if of course you want to be private about it and you're at the table with a bunch of people, there's nothing wrong with calling in advance, or, pulling someone over to the side, maybe on a trip to the bathroom or something like that, just to say, hey, can we do this? Plate power. So that's where if we're out and about, we want to still try to have a protein, a vegetable, and maybe a complex starch on our plate, or ideally at least like a protein, not ideally, but at least when in doubt, at least a protein and a veggie, right? Or a protein and a fruit. Avoid saving calories for social events, right? Still have breakfast, lunch, and if say the event's at like 4 o'clock, still have breakfast, lunch, and like a high protein snack before we go. Because if we're skipping meals or reducing calories going into that meal, we're more likely to binge or splurge at that meal and potentially take in more calories than we would have taken in if we had, balanced out our day a little bit more. Of course, throughout the challenge, we can have, red meat on Whole30, but it's ideal to aim for proteins that swim, fly, grow from the ground, or now I'm adding to the ism that eat grass. So if it's red meat that eats grass, sure, it's going to be a little higher in omega-3s, lower in saturated fat, and you're going to get more vitamins and minerals like vitamin A and vitamin E for that grass-fed choice. So it's going to be a more nutrient dense option. In general, though, aiming for those lean proteins, if weight loss is one of your goals, those leaner proteins like fish and poultry, they're going to be leaner in dietary fat. So you're going to get a greater percent of your calories from protein. And of course, it's going to help if you're trying to reduce dietary fat to stay in a calorie deficit, to go for those options. You want to check in with your hunger and fullness cues. So the phrase is honor your hunger. We don't want to deny that. We don't want to suppress that, because that's when it roars its lion head later in the day. And honor your fullness. So if our body's saying we're full, what is my future self gonna say to my present self? I've pushed it past fullness too many times that it just makes our stomach feel uncomfortable. And then we always end up asking ourselves, it's like, why did I do that? I don't feel good. What was the point of it? And just kind of remembering that concept of letting your body kind of guide the way, in the way of saying, all right, if I'm gonna have this and I'm not gonna feel good, and my future self isn't really going to be the most pleased, is it really worth it? Then no, it's not really worth it. If it's a food that you really, really want to have and you love it and you love the flavor of it and it's a comfort food, or it's something that goes back to childhood, all right, especially if it's after Whole30 and it's like something that would maybe be non-compliant, maybe can we give ourselves just like a small portion of it, right? Honor that craving, but maybe a small portion instead, right? Just to avoid that discomfort later on. At social gatherings, most of it's like more barbecue if we're at someone's house now this time of year, but avoid like posting up in the kitchen, or I say posting up where all the food is. Like get out on the lawn and play bocce ball or cornhole, or get in the pool, get active, stay social, but avoid posting up by the food. And then you're going to have less temptations dangling before you. A post-meal walk can be great when managing social splurges. If we caught ourselves that we're feeling a little bloated or uncomfortable, of course, walking and water can help move that digestion along. And of course, gratitude, right? I think gratitude's always really important, just to express to ourselves, all right, it might not have gone the best direction, but at least I had a vegetable on my plate and I'm proud of myself for that. What did I do well? What do I want to focus on next time? But it should never come from a place of guilt or shame, more so just from self-reflection, athlete mindset. Like, all right, we had a down half. What was working? What wasn't working? How do we tweak it so we can kick butt in the next half? And most importantly, too, keep snacks and things on hand. You never know what's going to happen. So it's always good to consider like the chopsticks or the Epic bars or the R bars or the Vital Proteins, the RX bars that have the cashews and not the peanuts, as easy things that you can kind of like turn to and keep in our bag this time of year that aren't really going to spoil too quickly. So a common barrier is I'm trying to cook healthier, but my family members are a little picky and I feel like a short order cook, and I end up caving into their preferences and then not setting the boundaries for me to have what I need. So some solutions to this little, conundrum that people run into is, get them involved in the process. Is this something that you guys are going to want to eat? So you're getting some kind of agreement, some kind of buy-in earlier, right? Can we cook together, right? Like, and even if someone doesn't know how to cook, right? Can you wash the produce? Can you start to boil the water? Can we get, small steps going with children or family members? And we can make it fun. My fiance didn't really know how to cook that much when we first started dating, and now I've started giving him like small tasks, and then it became something really nice that like we'll cook a meal together, and it feels really like gratifying, like, oh wow, this is something really nice that we did together, right? And took steps to get there. Consider interchangeable parts of the meal. All right, so what if some family members don't eat vegetables? All right, I'm just going to make a smaller portion so I can have some for myself and maybe some leftovers. I'm not going to make, for everybody if I know that they're not going to eat it. Will I encourage them to have it? Absolutely, though. And if they say they don't eat fish, right? But we're grilling, can we grill up, some chicken on the grill and some fish at the same time? If I'm going to start the grill, what's the difference of throwing two things on versus one? I'm still taking that same time to grill anyway. And then anything extra is leftovers to use for meal prep for another day. So I get to have my salmon and they get to have their chicken. Everyone's happy. And then we still have, our veggies and our salad side, say. Share your goals and how this can be negatively impacting you, right? So communication is king. Art of the phrasing is also very important, right? So if I'm coming at somebody, you do this, and now it impacts me, they're going to shut down. But if we say it in a way that it's like, hey, I really love that we sit and eat dinner together. However, I'm really struggling because I'm trying to get, more veggies or more seafood in my meals, but I know you don't like those meals. Is there something that we can do together to help me to get towards my goals, but then also satisfy your needs as well? So you're acknowledging they have needs, but you're also expressing your needs. And it's phrased in a way that's less blameful, more so, hey, this is the situation we're running into. How do we want to fix this together? Right. And there's all different strategies, like we said. Stress management. I feel like stress is the biggest thing for people when it comes to like portioning or cravings. It's usually one of the bigger culprits. So managing our stresses is important for our health. There's a hormonal influence to it. Stress can trigger the release of cortisol, which can lead to, increased appetite and cravings for some, right? The emotional eating stress can lead to turning to food for comfort. So when we're managing our stress better, it's like when people say that they went, oh, I just went away on vacation. I felt so relaxed. I completely forgot about, eating those common cravings I get when I'm home. And it's like, oh, well, what's the difference? I was satisfying my emotional needs in other ways by getting out, getting time in the sun, getting time in the water, whatever that is, to help satisfy that emotional need. So then therefore I'm not looking to cope or satisfy that emotional need, say with food or other things. And listen, people cope all the time with other things like drugs, alcohol. Food is not the worst one, but it's also important to look at our relationship with that and how that's impacting our life. And then saying, okay, if it is impacting our life, what else do I want to actively take steps towards to manage my stress? Do I need to, start going to yoga? Do I want to add meditation in my life? Is it a crushing stress feeling that maybe I need to consider mental health treatment? There's a Sunrise Counseling Center. They're actually like right down the block from us. They're right here. They're awesome. They've been in business for a while. So if you're someone that is really struggling with this, that maybe, talking with a dietitian to help manage this, as well as a mental health counselor, can really just get to the root of the issue, so that just like anything, if I have a cut, I'm going to go to the doctor, right? If my blood sugars go high, I'm going to go to the doctor. If I'm having an issue managing my stress, I'm going to go to the people that help me to manage that stress, so that I can no longer have to deal with that barrier or burden in my life. And I can lead a happier, healthier life because I've put that time and effort in. Other stress management techniques: exercise. I am a better person when I exercise. Even if it's just getting out for a walk, I feel like more grounded and level-headed. Also, I love like strength training for that reason, because I'm just listening to music or a podcast. It's like an hour of time that you're not kind of like serving other people. You're just giving yourself a chance to kind of fill your cup and process and think about your day. Adequate sleep, right? If we're sleep deprived, I know me, I'm not my best self if I'm at 4 hours of sleep. Relaxation practices, self-care, there's deep breathing. There's also progressive relaxation where you start your toes as you're laying down, maybe in bed, and you squeeze those toes really, really tight for a couple seconds, release. You do your calves really, really tight for a couple seconds, release. Work your way up to like your hammies and your quads, then your glutes, and then all the way up to your face. And it can actually help to relax the body. And it's actually a form of meditation, because you're taking your mind off whatever those racing thoughts could be, and you're putting it onto that activity per se. Or just different hobbies, right? Different hobbies. So I like to call it like flow state. Flow state is like when you're doing something and you're really just like not really thinking about other things, and you're just kind of very present in the moment and only thinking about that one thing you're doing. So in lacrosse, you would call it, what would you call it? Actually, I forgot. I think it's having flow. I played for years, and why am I not remembering? I think it's like, yeah, they say that you have like flow or whatever. This person just has like the finesse of the game, that they're in the moment of the game. They're not worrying about what's going on in the minutes coming up in the future and what's going on in the minutes that passed. I'm just solely in that present moment, just enjoying it, being happy, and doing my thing. It happens a lot when people are like knitting, say, or going for a run, walking. That's where you can also experience like flow state. So next, I think most important, like, let's get to the Q&A. We talked about a bunch of different things that is going on, but are you guys running into, specific situations or scenarios or anything that you really want to bring up that maybe are wins in handling different like social splurges or barriers in the past, couple weeks? Yeah, it seems like everyone's been doing really, really well. Like, especially, I love that some people have been finding different like triggers and saying, okay, I'm feeling much better. I'm losing weight. I'm noticing that, my bloating's going down. Or I love like, feeling comfort in being at like a social party and having control to say, all right, I don't need to have that food. And I find that to be sometimes like such a freeing epiphany for people to say, okay, all these foods are in front of me, but I don't necessarily need to have them. And I don't need to feel stressed about them either. Um, Anything else that anyone wants to share? I know the Marry Me chicken's been such a popular item in the group chat, along with like the chicken piccata. No. All right, guys. All right. So um, next week, we have the 27th coming up. We're celebrating successes. And of course, most importantly, too, aside from the important factor of celebrating successes, we're going to go over the reintroduction phases of how to add these foods back into the diet and truly kind of discover those triggers that could be influencing weight, inflammation, joint pain, headaches, GI symptoms, etc. So we're going to focus on going over how to introduce one of those foods at a time, or those food groups at a time, and an appropriate timeline for that going into July. So 30 days ends July 1st. So it's coming. We're in the final stretches. And so once this video gets processed by Zoom, and then I can upload it to YouTube and get that processed, we'll send that out. The goal is 24 hours. So by end of day tomorrow, to have the recording of today's presentation out. We'll also give you guys the slides And, you'll look forward to the new recipes coming out this weekend as well. Of course, for anything personal, please don't hesitate to email us, message us on the side, any questions that's going on. But keep it up in the group because the group's been really, really, really sweet. And I like that everyone's been posting or sharing experiences in the group. So let's just keep it going. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening. And most importantly, thank you for sitting in tonight and working hard on the program. We're 3 weeks in. We got one more week really left in the grand scheme. So you've got this, and enjoy your nights, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.